And we are live. State lawmakers across the country are waking up to the threat of the Great Reset and taking action. Also, there's a narrative being promoted by the corporate media that the economy is booming. Is that really the case? We'll talk about that and more on episode 340 of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and joining me today, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you today, good sir?
I'm doing just fine. You know, if you hear me or see me kind of slurring my words or not being able to talk correctly today, as if I was Joe Biden or something like that, it's because I got smashed in the face with a tennis ball last night, right there, right in the kisser.
And Justin still hasn't apologized.
I know. God, so rude.
At least you didn't get slapped by Will Smith. Also joining us, we have Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. How are you today, good sir? And how does your hat correlate with hating whales?
It doesn't coordinate with hating whales, unfortunately. I can't find that hat. I don't know what happened to that thing. I'm doing pretty well. Seeing your smiling face, Donnie, always brings so much joy to my life. Of course, seeing Jim's face makes me want to kill myself, so it all kind of evens itself out, I guess. But yeah, all in all, I'm doing okay.
Chris Talgo, diffuse the situation. Senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you?
Doing good. We got started Masters. We got started baseball happening today, so we got spring in full effect.
Masters? What is that? Is that like a slave thing?
That would be the official beginning of the golf season.
Oh, golf. Okay.
Oh, golf. Sweet. All right. So before we get into the topics at hand, I do want to put that message out there for our audio-only listeners that are hearing this on a Friday, that if you want the show a day earlier, you can join us on Thursdays. You can watch the show live Thursday at noon Central Time. It'll be streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and a whole host of places. Rumble. If you look hard enough, you will find us, and you can join in the conversation live. Leave a comment, leave a question. Justin's laughing at me. Maybe we'll respond to your comment. Maybe we'll address your question live on the show. Also, our show is streaming on In the Tank podcast channel on YouTube. We made a separate channel just for this show because YouTube tried to nuke our main Heartland channel because of some of the things that we said on the podcast. So in an effort not to self-censor ourselves, we created our own standalone channel on YouTube, In the Tank podcast. Subscribe there to make sure you don't miss an episode and to support our free speech. All right, so before we get into the topics at hand, one thing that was kind of interesting, we talk about social media censorship and that all the time. Elon Musk made ripples recently by, it was reported that he bought 9.5% of Twitter. A day later, it was confirmed that Elon Musk was going to be joining Twitter's board of directors. I think a couple of years ago, we probably would have not made too much of this. But recently, Musk has been pretty vocal in support of free speech, pretty critical of lefty stuff recently. He's referred to himself as a free speech absolutist. He said that free speech is essential for a functioning democracy and criticized Twitter specifically for failing to adhere to free speech principles. Jim, I'm going to start with you. What was your reaction to this news?
I thought it was fantastic news. I mean, especially, I thought it was even more fantastic the more crazed the left got about the entire prospect, right? Because as he mentioned, Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist. He didn't just buy 10% of Twitter, and he actually didn't do it overnight. This was, as I read somewhere, it was kind of slowly he was building his stake in Twitter, and then kind of just went over the 10%, became the largest stakeholder, or shareholder, and then of course he was appointed to the board of directors. And so, this is described by the left as some kind of threat now, right? Threat to democracy or threat or something. I think there was a tweet out there from some, prominent leftist journalist saying something to the effect that, it's not really cool to have oligarchs in charge of our important media outlets in this country or free speech outlets in this country. Like, excuse me. Did you say that when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post as his basically personal newsletter for the world? I mean, that's right, oligarchy. So it's not good for Elon Musk to have a stake, a large stake in Twitter, but it's okay for Jeff Bezos to own the entirety of the Washington Post as his own personal, messaging playground. And again, the reason Elon Musk is a threat is because he is one of the few people prominent in this country in both wealth and influence who is not a hardcore leftist, who is not interested in shaping the government to do his bidding, or like he's really against. This is what's really unique about Elon Musk. For the most part, he is against this nexus of government and business coming together to basically drive the culture in a way that the people wouldn't go on their own. He's not interested in that kind of global transformation. He's interested in freedom and free speech and advancing people voluntarily. And so that's why he's such a big threat, because he's not interested in censorship. I'm sure he was triggered partly to buy this much of Twitter because of, the whole Hunter Biden story, that, it was banned from social media. As we learn now, the whole Hunter Biden laptop was real. It was not Russian disinformation. It was real. And it was important for people to know this before the election. But of course, Twitter and Facebook and all of the media controlled by people like Jeff Bezos, banned the story from ever being broadcast or talked about or shared anywhere on social media. And so, he's a threat to that sort of thing, to the ability and the desire of the rich and powerful in this country to control thought.
Yeah, I've got an article here. It's an NBC News article that I think I might just label as like the most embarrassing article of the week. I think we should start doing that as a recurring segment. It is titled "Elon Musk's joining Twitter's board of directors should sound alarm bells," and it was originally titled, and you could see this if you go to like the URL. The original title of this was "Elon Musk gave us disturbing hints of what he'd do on Twitter's board." So they changed the title a little bit, but either one is super embarrassing. But this is just further evidence of what, Jim, you started off this with, of it riling up the left. The article basically talks about how Elon Musk has acted irresponsibly on Twitter in the past, making statements about how some statement about Tesla funding that resulted in the SEC accusing him of misleading the markets, to spreading COVID misinformation. In fact, he even shared an anti-vax meme. Stop the presses, everybody. I know. The author then goes to talk about so-called free speech and how it could have deadly consequences, and points to Trump tweet that the author claims has been interpreted by some as instigating the January 6th riots. The author goes on to say, there is also reason for us to question Musk's commitment to the greater public good more broadly. In response to criticism that he hasn't paid his fair share in taxes, he tweeted in November, "Much is made lately of unrealized gains being a means of tax avoidance. So I propose selling 10% of my Tesla stock. Do you support this?" And he added a yes-no poll. Oh my gosh, people. He also publicly questioned the value of contributing to the World Food Program to fight hunger, leading one expert to liken his behavior to that of a troll. So all of this is being presented to us as some evidence that he shouldn't be allowed to own stock in Twitter and be on their board? Like, is this crazy? Are we in clown world here, Justin?
Yeah, but you knew that.
We've been
in clown world for a long time. If anything, this is a sort of a step away from clown world into what should be common sense. I've been saying for a long time that, look, Elon Musk is not, I wouldn't say he's a conservative. I would say he doesn't really care about politics all that much. He has certain ideas that he holds and he embraces those things and he often acts on them. And this is an example of that. He believes in free speech. Whatever he believes about other things, I don't necessarily know, but he believes in free speech. And he's saying, look, I'm going to live that out. I've got the money to do this. I'm going to try to do something positive in this realm. He's actually floated ideas out like this for a while. He once floated out an idea out about making his own social media company. He's been talking about potentially doing something about this free speech censorship issue for a while. So, I mean, it's not totally out of the blue that we're finding out about this. It sort of makes sense. But I've been saying for a long time that one of the most frustrating things from my perspective has been that I don't see people with lots of money who do believe in these sort of core values that everybody who's a conservative, the vast majority of conservatives believe in, going out and actually putting their money where their mouth is and doing something like this. And we rarely see that happen. We see them spend money on campaigns and do stuff like that. But a lot of them won't give money to the causes that they say they believe in. And this is an example of somebody actually taking that step. We see people on the left all the time throw massive amounts of money into causes that they believe in. But people on the right, even if it's just talking about a single issue. So on this issue of free speech, Elon Musk is on the right. He actually going out and doing that. But how often do we see other conservatives do that? Almost never on this issue.
Right.
So seeing Elon Musk, who again is not really political, but seeing Elon Musk, a champion of free speech, actually go out and do something, hopefully won't be the last time that he and other people with that kind of money who agree with with us on free speech do something like this, because this is the only way. It can't just be Elon Musk buying 10% of one social media company. That's not going to save us. We need lots of people with money. Look, if I had $275 billion like Elon Musk, I'd go out and do this too. We need more people with money who do that. And I know everybody here on this show would do the same thing. We need more people who actually do have the means to go out and do this sort of thing. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, right? So this is a great first step. I like it. I hope it triggers a series of inspires other really wealthy people who share our values to go out and
I heard
do that.
I heard MySpace is going for like $25.60.
It sounds like a really good project for the Heartland Institute.
We might be able to pull some money.
We might be able to buy MySpace. Good.
So the author ends off the article saying, as we head into another presidential election, which is like 2.5 years from now. I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, we are heading there, technically, I guess, always. So.
And are seeing the spread of another COVID subvariant. It's more important than ever to ensure that social media doesn't continue to promote violence or misinformation. It's astounding that Twitter would call on someone like Musk to help oversee a company that urgently needs to crack down on the very kinds of bad behavior that he himself has been responsible for on its platform.
He did.
So, Chris,
they didn't call on him. Did they?
No, yeah, they're like,
they just bought the stock,
right?
They probably didn't want him.
Right.
Would be my guess.
Like the idea of just making sure that there's not. It seems like that statement is going a little bit further than just making sure people don't like egregiously abuse the concept of free speech. It seems like this author is calling for further, censorship and all of that. What do you think, Chris?
Well, perhaps he's worried that what Twitter did in the lead up to the 2020 election, in which they buried the Hunter laptop story, is no longer going to be the status quo in 2024 if Elon Musk does actually break some changes through over at Twitter. I agree with what Justin and Jim said. I do think this is a good first step. I hope that it leads to more of this. Twitter is it's like the societal filter nowadays. So if Twitter, just like goes out of their way to stifle a story, it can't reach, society. So right. I think until, Twitter is an open forum as it was supposed to be, we're going to just constantly be knocking at this problem. I hope this is the beginning of a new trend.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm actually kind of hoping that the left is like, well, we need to create our own social media thing now. And it'll be like censored.com. Yeah. And everything that one person is offended by can report it and it's immediately removed.
Right.
Just be a blank website.
Not Twitter, Quitter.
Quitter.
Quitter. It's great. No free speech. Everyone gets banned all the time. It's basically a digital gulag. It sounds exactly like what they want. I mean, that's what they should do. Donnie and I talked about this. We think there should be a left-wing social media company. Yeah. This is what Elon Musk should do. He should start another Twitter that's just like Twitter, except it's for the left. and it has a little button on it that instead of is like a love button, it's like I'm an offended button.
Yeah.
And you click on the I'm offended button and automatically the tweet goes away. So anyone who's offended can get rid of anything that's offensive at any time.
Right.
They'll have no posts, inevitably. Everything will be banned constantly. But that's a safe space. That's what safe spaces look like, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, safespace.com.
Well, Tucker Carlson did a monologue on this a night or two ago, and he mentioned, I'm sure actually most of his viewers, most of these listeners are not on Twitter, right? I mean, Twitter is a big deal, and it's a big deal because it's a big deal in media. Tucker made the point that it's the people who set the news agenda in this country that are on Twitter constantly. All they do is tweet all day, and so that's why Twitter has actually outsized importance to its actual impact as far as being used by Americans or people around the world. It's because it's so vital to the people who drive the media agenda in this country. But Elon Musk is a threat to this because this has been the MO of the left for as long as anyone can remember, and it's that when you're losing an argument, just silence your opponents. It's real easy to win that way. You just, I don't like what you're saying, so I'll just stop you from saying it. I win. Yay, I win. And they've been doing this for decades. And Elon Musk does not believe in that. And he sees that for the evil that it is. And he sees, and I think he's made these kinds of statements, it's incompatible with a free society. And it's frankly un-American to not embrace free speech in public platforms. And he does not, one of those, the thing you were writing there, or reading there on screen earlier, Donnie talked about, I guess even Elon Musk has encouraged violence and all of this stuff. Look, the left believes that speech is violence.
Right.
And they also believe that violence is speech. It depends on who's doing it, but
Or
violence is
silence
speech
is
to them.
speech.
That's right. Silence
Or
is
wait,
violence.
Silence
Yes.
is violence.
Yeah,
That's
oh my
right.
God. It's so hard to
Everything
keep it
is
all
speech.
straight. Right. Yes, right. Speech
Everything's
is violence.
Everything's
Not speaking. Silence is violence, but violence is speech. That's great. That's the way the left thinks about things. Elon Musk does not believe in that stuff. And I think this is a great development. And if leftists on Twitter don't like it, get your own Elon Musk.
Exactly.
Donnie, the current CEO of Twitter, I forget his name. He said, basically that on Twitter you have the right to say things, but you don't have the right to be heard. I think that is just completely, backwards. Like Jim said, Twitter, for whatever reason, has become the societal filter for what trends, what doesn't trend, and it allows a very small group of people to manipulate what is and isn't being said around the country. And I completely agree with Elon Musk, and we should have a free, open discourse. Let all the ideas come out in the open, and the best ones win. Like Jim said, the left is afraid of that because I think that they're afraid that their ideas will not win out if there is a open, free, robust debate of ideas.
We've been critical of Elon Musk in the past on this show and him getting a bunch of subsidies for his electric cars and all of that, and other comments that he's made on certain issues in line with those things. But he's been kind of hitting it out of the park lately. Another thing that kind of came across my desk, and this ties into our main topic at hand with the Great Reset and ESG and all of that, is he had a tweet recently. It was during some type of Twitter thread talking about ESG. And he responded to this Twitter thread saying that I am increasingly convinced that corporate ESG is the devil incarnate. You don't really mince your words like that. It's that's pretty blunt and to the point. And then also this quote comes a couple of weeks after another quote by Musk, who was responding to a Marc Andreessen tweet where Marc Andreessen tweeted, "The plan, ESG funds will invest in defense companies to make the weapons required to fight wars with hostile regimes we buy energy from, because ESG funds won't invest in energy companies." To which Musk responded with, "ESG rules have been twisted to insanity." So, I mean, Justin, someone like him coming out in support of free speech, that's one thing. For him, this big corporate guy coming out and slamming ESG, that's huge. What's your response to that?
Yeah, without a doubt. The vast majority of the sort of corporate elites in not just in America, but in Europe and in Canada are all for ESG. They love ESG because ESG is helping them make lots and lots of money. It's helping some of the investor class sort of control society and manipulate society. It's helping banks And central banks do the same thing through this very elaborate system. We talk about all of this when we've done our videos on the Great Reset on the Stopping Socialism TV channel and our work with Glenn Beck and all of that. It's all a huge part of what the Great Reset is. Elon Musk, but anyone who studied that knows that really at the core of the Great Reset, of ESG, of social credit scoring systems, is this drive for money. It's this drive for money that exists. It's all this money from banks, financial institutions, BlackRock, central banks flooding into the system. And then they've got to figure out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are so that they can give the money to the people who are on their side. That's basically how all this works. Well, Elon Musk has plenty of money. And Elon Musk isn't interested in that game at all, really. He's a Tesla, Edison type guy. That's where he's become rich in that world. That's his world. And he uses money to advance that part of of societal advancement. He's not interested in playing this other game at all. And so he's one of the few people who can look at all of this and say, I don't want any part of this whole ESG system that you guys are building, because that's not really why he's in it. So many of the other people who are in CEO positions are there not because they invented something, but because they climbed the corporate ladder and they went to, Harvard Business School or Yale or whatever, and they've worked their way up to this, and they've played this game, and they're going to keep playing this game, and they've got an agenda, and they want to make sure that they stay on top. Elon Musk doesn't worry about that. No one's throwing him out of Tesla, and that's what that tweet about, hey, do you want me to sell 10% of my Tesla stock? What do you guys think? Is that because, of course, nobody who's invested in Tesla wants him to sell 10% of his Tesla stock because they want him in charge of Tesla. That's the whole point. So he has the ability to look at this from a completely different perspective. He's sort of like, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to anyway, because I think it is true to a large extent. He's sort of like a Donald Trump in that. You
just got him canceled.
In that he's from that world, right? He's from that world. Donald Trump was from that world. And then because he was from it, he had the ability to look at it and say, I can see all the flaws in it. And this is a terrible system, and it's the swamp. And he would openly talk about how, yeah, of course you buy politicians off. That's what we do. We buy politicians off through donations and this elaborate. So that's how everything gets done in New York. What are you joking? He was able to do that because he was taking a step out. He was in that world. He took a step out of it, and he was able to have a perspective on it that most people don't have. Elon Musk can do sort of the same thing because he's so untouchable that he can speak as a CEO with that perspective without worrying really about getting thrown out of his company or anything like that. So he has the ability to call these people out in a way that others don't. And I think that's what makes him so powerful and frankly so dangerous. And that's why they've got to label him a dangerous guy. Right. Because if he's not dangerous, then we should listen to him maybe, because he has knowledge in this area. He's a genius. No one disputes that. So there's got to be some reason why we got to not listen to him. The same way that Donald Trump had to be dangerous, even though he know what the swamp is. He lived in the swamp. He thrived in the swamp. He knows what it is. No, he's too dangerous. You can't listen to him. So it's the same thing here, right? We got to destroy Elon Musk now so that people don't listen to him. Otherwise, they might actually learn something about all of this from somebody who has the money and the power to do something about it.
Well, I think all of you pointed out in the first part of the discussion about him with Twitter, is he's clearly not a conservative. He's a moderate at best, and probably a left-leaning moderate at best. But we could add him to the list of left-leaning people that are skeptical of, if not completely opposed to, the ESG and the Great Reset by extension. I think we covered that one lady on the I think it was like The Hill. Like they had the Hill has a show where she was exploring the Great Reset because it was a conspiracy theory, and then realized it wasn't a conspiracy theory and was railing against the Great Reset. Comedian Russell Brand has been making a ton of videos exposing the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset agenda. Now Elon Musk is dragging ESG. So, I mean, Chris, do you think that this has the potential, this anti-ESG, anti-Great Reset has the potential to become like a nonpartisan issue? What do you think?
I hope so. I think Elon Musk, like Justin was saying, he's an outsider. He literally wasn't, born in the United States. He understands the way that the United States is currently being run. It's basically an oligarchy. Go along to get along. Centralize everything, make everything, Washington D.C. based. And I think that he is against that because Elon Musk is an innovator. He wants to have freedom. He wants to have freedom of thought, freedom of ideas. He wants people to go and to feel okay, going against the accepted, status quo. So I hope that Elon Musk's bravery on this issue sparks more people who are moderates or maybe lean left to become, more outspoken. I guess, we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I am hoping so. And I have a little bit more to say on that topic, but I want to get into this ESG thing. So, well, no, actually, first off on this point, I think that it's very possible, and Justin and I have had this discussion before, probably not on this podcast, but I think it's very possible that far lefties like AOC and Bernie Sanders would not support ESG or the Great Reset if they fully understood its implications. If you want to elaborate on that, Justin, you can, but I do want to get into this action that's going on at the state level with
yeah, well, I would put an asterisk on that. I agree with it as it's currently constructed. I think they'd be all for an ESG system run by the government, where the government uses it as a way to determine who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. But that big businesses and corporations, they just cut them out, cut the middlemen out. We don't need them. Let's make this more efficient. Let's just have the government enact a social credit system.
Exactly.
I think they're all for that, but
Right.
But they're not for.
They want to be in control of it.
Yeah, they don't want Davos anywhere near this. They don't want big corporations anywhere near it. They don't like big banks. They just think the government should be the banks and the government should be in charge of all the businesses. And so, yeah, so I think they don't like the Great Reset as it's currently built. They want their own Great Reset, and it's different and maybe bloodier. I don't know. It kind of depends on how it all works out. Probably worse. Yeah.
So largely due to the latest Glenn Beck book, The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism, co-authored by Justin Haskins and with me as a contributor, these plans and their implications have been exposed for what they are, an attempt to control the economy and society by extension using ESG and money printing and other stuff. This has rightfully alarmed lawmakers across the country who have been flocking to the Heartland Institute for more information on ESG and advice on how to stop it, resulting in legislative proposals on the state level in several states throughout the country. Justin and I did a video on this for Stopping Socialism TV probably about a month ago, outlining some of these states and identifying what actions they have taken. But recently, because of the continued action that has been happening at a state level, we have updated that map. So, Andy, if you could pull up this sweet-looking map here, you can see this nicely color-coordinated chart showing all the action across the country here. I think in, almost 30 states? More than half of the states.
It's 20. Depending on how you count it, it's 28. I think is on the map color.
Right. So, Justin, you could probably do a better job of taking us through some of what these color codings mean. And for those audio only listeners, you're missing out. It's a beautiful chart. You're gonna miss the full effect when you're only listening to the audio. But go ahead, Justin.
Who made that beautiful chart, by the way?
I don't know.
This map.
I don't know. Probably some.
I don't know who
gentlemen.
made it. Probably me. I just probably forgot about it. So it wasn't me, by the way. So anyway, this map shows not just where Heartland is working, although we are working with the vast majority of these states, lawmakers in these states, almost all of them, but not necessarily all of them, on bills that will, to some extent, address the ESG issue. So there are really to simplify the map, because if you're looking at it, there's a bunch of different colors on here. I'm going to try to simplify it. Basically, there are two kinds of anti-ESG bills or actions being taken by lawmakers in states. One is directed towards getting the states to divest from companies and investment management firms and others, financial institutions in some cases, insurance companies are sometimes involved in this, that are actively using ESG to boycott certain kinds of industries, especially related to energy and agriculture and timber and things kind of in that realm. That tends to be where these investment management firms are doing this. So BlackRock, for example, loves to use ESG to try to manipulate the energy market, to try to kill the fossil fuel companies and try to kill a variety of other industries related to sort of agriculture, like I said before, and timber and those kinds of things, right? So those kinds of bills and actions would have the state divest from a company like BlackRock so that they're not giving money to an industry and to a particular business that's actively trying to undermine the economy of these states, right?
Right.
Seems like real common sense stuff, although you'd be surprised how many people are trying to push back against this, including some rhino Republicans in some of these places as well. So that's one set of bills. And on the map, if you're looking at the map, states that are enacting this sort of thing, either through their treasurers or through their legislatures or both, include places like West Virginia that's on there. Riley Moore, the treasurer there, has gotten a lot of press lately over his actions trying to push back against BlackRock. Kentucky is on there. They actually just put a bill into place that was vetoed by the governor. They passed it, but it was vetoed by the governor, who's a Democrat, although they think they might actually have the votes to overturn the veto there. So that's pretty crazy. Indiana proposed a bill earlier this year. They're going to probably try again next year. Missouri, North Dakota already has something in place. Texas already has something in place. Tennessee is looking at that. All the ones that are in green, or that's Arkansas is the only one, I guess, right? And some of the ones that have mixed colors, like I think Idaho is one where they're looking at legislation for that as well. So that's one way of doing this, right? The other way of doing it, what I think is the better way of attacking the ESG issue, is to say we're not going to allow financial institutions and banks and insurance companies, ideally, to use ESG to discriminate against anybody. We're not only going to divest from them, we're not going to allow them to do that in our state. So, for example, a bank can't deny a loan to a company that is very well qualified to get the loan purely because they don't like something that company said on social media or something else about that company's ESG score. Similarly, they couldn't deny access to bank accounts for individual people for similar sorts of reasons. For example, Donald Trump, people who have worked for Donald Trump himself, people in the Trump Corporation as a whole has been denied access to banking services by a variety of different banks just because it's Donald Trump. They're not because they're not eligible for it for other reasons, just because it's Donald Trump. We've got examples from all over the country of smaller groups, political groups, Republican parties, for example, gun manufacturers, tobacco companies, others who have been denied access to capital, fracking businesses, denied access to capital purely because of the kind of business that they're in. And what we're saying is, no, states should enact rules that say, unless the state believes that activity should be illegal wholesale, that banks and financial institutions should make the decision, treat everybody equally, everybody fairly. They shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against people, which is exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And we've got lots and lots of evidence. We've got reports from groups like Morningstar, which is a huge industry insider, a major financial services company that is worth, I think, billions of dollars. And they put out reports where they openly say banks are doing this all over the country. They use ESG scores, social credit scores, to deny access to capital for people. So we think that should be prohibited, that is not a good thing to have in a free market. We want more competition. We want people to be judged on their finances, not on subjective standards like something they wrote on Twitter one time, or who the owner of the business voted for, or any number of other things. That should not be how an economy functions. So in reaction to that, if you want to pull up the map, and then I can talk about the reaction to it, the states that have been looking at legislation in that are the ones that are in red on the map. You have Arizona.
Or purple, right?
Red, yeah, purple too. Red and purple. Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Kansas, Idaho, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Louisiana, South Carolina, all these states. And of course, New Hampshire, which is why I'm wearing this University of New Hampshire hat.
Oh, that's
it's
what that
themed.
is.
It's very themed. They've got a big vote coming up, I think, next week in their Senate in a committee hearing. They'll have a committee hearing, and then they'll probably vote on the floor. If it gets out of committee in the Senate, it might actually pass, and then that would be the very first total anti-ESG bill passed out of a legislature.
And they were the state
historic.
They were the state that like kicked this all off too.
They were the very first state to put a bill like that into place, and they're right now on track to be the first state to actually pass it and get it to a governor who is a Republican in that state. So they have a chance there, real chance. We've Betty Grandy, who works at the Heartland Institute, former state lawmaker for many, many years in North Dakota, state government relations manager here, has been all over the country testifying on these bills, done an incredible job. I've been on these calls with lawmakers, been on the email threads, talking to lawmakers directly myself, and Betty's in communication with them almost every day. She's going to New Hampshire next week to testify on that bill. Wow. So this is a huge, huge moment for us. She already went to New Hampshire and testified it in the House when it passed the House. So huge, huge moment for people who are opposed to ESG scores and social credit systems. And I just want to add one last thing. I know I've been talking on and on, but this has basically been my life for like a year and a half, so just bear with me. The biggest objection that we hear outside of bank law.
Oh, wait, no. Save that. I'll get to that.
All right,
I'll get to that. Yeah, we'll save that. Jim, when we're looking at this map here, well, first off, when we were helping, with this book and we were talking with Glenn Beck about like, what do we do for like the final chapter, the how to fight back against all this. The entire book is just like talking about exposing this giant like monster of a thing that's set to try to control the economy and society by extension. How do we fight against it? And I will say that part of the book took us all the longest amount of time. We couldn't figure out good real life solutions to fight against this. And then kind of out of nowhere, like I said, New Hampshire kind of started this all off and this cascading effect across the states. It seems like fighting this at a state level has become the solution to pushing back against the Great Reset. And Jim, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the Heartland Institute, is to kind of be in state level government across the country. So, I mean, this you must look at this and just get all giddy inside, right?
No, it's great. It's great. It actually reminds me of, there's no think tank in America that has more influence in more states on the ground state level with legislators than the Heartland Institute. We've been reaching out and working with legislators, educating them on the issues all across the country, state by state, for 36 years. I mean, this is what we do. And so this it was encouraging. It's like, hey, there's a great idea. And that's actually kind of the part of this. We're a republic. We're the United States of America, and the states are supposed to be part of their purpose is to be laboratories to see what can work and what can't. And as Justin, as you were talking, and we're talking about this state to state. I mean, ESG is like a global issue. It's something that's coming down from the global elites. It's part and parcel of the Great Reset, which is not an American idea. It was not birthed here, but it's going to be a global system of control, if not outright governance. But it reminded me actually of, like, say for instance, California, right? California, 20 years ago, decided to vote and implement for itself stricter emissions standards for vehicles than any other state. And what did the auto industry in the United States have to do? In fact, around the world have to do? Make every car adhere to California's stricter emission standards, because they can't just make California cars and then sell everything else to everybody else. And so in this way, it's kind of in reverse. And so if you have these states making it illegal to discriminate in lending or in banking and in other business things in the private sector based on ESG, then these corporations kind of have to think about, well, do I want to do business in Texas for the rest of my life, or do I not? I have to throttle this back or find a way to become in compliance with these states. And the fact that more than half the states in this country are taking some level of measure against ESG is amazing, because now there's a competition here, right? The competition's great. Now these states are going to compete with themselves to see which state, especially if they have a conservative governor, like, say, I don't know, Florida, say Ron DeSantis, say he wants to be the most anti-ESG governor in America. Well, let's see if he can do that. And he'll have to compete with states like Texas and West Virginia and other places like that. That's wonderful. And anything, and again, as Justin was talking, and I always think about this on this podcast, it's funny how it always comes to my mind. The Grahamsian march through the institutions by the left. a generation ago, the left and corporations were at loggerheads. They were enemies. Now here we are in the second decade of the 21st century, and we have the left and the biggest corporations in the world, but especially the United States, working hand in hand to change society together. And they've been doing that in smaller ways for about the last 15, 20 years. But now with this ESG stuff, it's basically taking the leverage of the corporate world to impose your social desires upon the society. If you can get the corporations to enforce, to be the enforcement arm, to be the police, to be the people that implement your leftist vision, and you have the government on your side, which wants to do this anyway, you are big time. You're in a big time winning position. But now what we have, again, state by state, are states looking at this and going, hold on a sec, this isn't right. And this has all started a little by little. I mean, Justin, you talked about how banks can't be discriminating on a business just because the left doesn't like that business, like firearms manufacturers, for instance. A lot of states, a lot of lefties, no bank should ever give a loan to Smith and Wesson. How is that legal? How could that be legal in the United States? If it's a legal business, they're not breaking any laws, they should be able to participate in our capitalist system just like anybody else. But the left would like to make that not possible. ESG is the latest scheme to make it so that it's not possible for corporations or businesses or industries or people that the left frowns upon from actually participating in society. That's their goal. And it's great to see states pushing back one by one.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, conservatives tend to be a little fatalistic when it comes to stuff. I mean, I even had hints of that when I was kind of teeing up this response to all of this in the state level. So, what are your thoughts when you see this just like enthusiastic support of this type of thing just spreading across the country, this quickly?
I actually see a connection between what we were just talking about with Twitter trying to control society through not letting certain ideas and certain thoughts, come into the societal mainstream. Banks are just doing the same thing with money. They're saying, we don't like these products, or we don't like these companies or what they're producing or whatever. So we're just going to censor them by not giving them access to capital. So I think it's very dangerous. I think that Jim brought up a really good point with the point about the states. If a few states can fight back against this, that could have a humongous effect, because these big financial institutions, they have customers across the states. So if, for example, the companies in Florida are saying, hey, Merrill Lynch, or hey, Bank of America, or hey, Goldman Sachs, we aren't going to do business with you because of these ESG things, I strongly think that that's going to make these financial giants think twice about this, because they would be theoretically losing out on hundreds of millions of their customers. So I think that this is a great way to put to try to at least put some sort of roadblock in the way of ESG, just like California did but it's in reverse with the car emission standards.
Yeah, for the people that are tuning in, obviously we've got people tuning in and listening to this in states across the country. If you look at that map, you could see where you're needed to, reach out to your lawmakers and all the people that are making these decisions in your state level and say, hey, we support stuff like this. And also on our Heartland website, heartland.org/ESG again. I don't know.
Yeah, it is twice, but you can just go to heartland.org and the button to
right on the front.
Right on the front.
Yeah. You can find just a whole litany of different articles and resources to learn up on all of this stuff, so that if you do contact your lawmakers, you'll have a little bit more intellectual ammunition on the ready.
I just want to add to that, just to toot Heartland's horn a little bit more. And Justin knows this because he should know this because he got the forwarded email. Reporters are starting to look into this ESG stuff. Again, there's a lot of education that needs to happen on this. A reporter reached out to me saying, it's obvious from looking at your website that you guys have done more work and research on ESG than anybody I've ever found. So, can you talk to me about it? So, it's great. Stay at heartland.org for all the latest information on this. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah. And speaking of that education, well, no, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, we've talked about this before, but the ESG standards themselves can be changed at any time. So, right. Hey, you could be in favor of them now because you think, oh, I'm okay, I'm part of the club. That could change rapidly. In 10 years, you could be on the outs looking in.
No doubt.
So for anyone who supports this, just, beware of that.
Yeah.
This is something where if it gains a foothold, who knows what it could become later down the road.
That's a very good point. And Justin, this is what I want to get to a point that I cut you off of making earlier, which actually ties into something that Jim just said, which has to do with just the education that's needed on a countrywide basis. Because one of the things that has slowed down the progress of legislation in some of these states, even some of these states that are very red, is this misconception that ESG is just part of the free market. And this misconception has led Republicans in some of these color-coded states in that map to reject anti-ESG legislation. So, Justin, we figured that, Republicans would be a shoo-in in regards to supporting this type of legislation. But now we find ourselves in a position where we're wondering do we need to preach to the choir more than we thought we would have? Thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. The biggest resistance that we're seeing is partially from lobbyists who are just working their corruption, cronyist magic on lawmakers in certain places. But other than that, the biggest objection we're seeing from an ideological perspective is that there are people concerned that this is telling businesses what to do. Look, if they want to build this elaborate ESG scoring system and use ESG to decide who they're going to give money to and who they're not going to give money to, that's just the free market. That's the argument that they're making.
If you don't like it, build your own banking sector.
Yeah, build your own banking sector. And that's the argument we're making. So the problem with that, there's many problems with it, but sort of a short summary of it. And if you go to heartland.org and you look at the ESG page that had been referenced previously, there's a whole article just about this in the Learn the Basics sections at the top. But what the main issue is, number one, this whole system is just full of cronyism and corruption. Okay. The first thing is corporations, big, gigantic corporations and the financial system in general is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the entire world. They work hand in hand with government all the time. They are actively coordinating with officials in government all the time, at conferences, out in the open, working with them in meetings, talking about how they're going to, for example, use the financial industry to prohibit access to capital for fossil fuel companies or people or even businesses that just refuse to buy electric cars someday. Okay. These are things they're openly saying. So they're actively coordinating, working hand in hand with government. That's number one. Number two, and they're heavily regulated. Number two, they have received huge billions and billions and billions of dollars in handouts from the government. Many of them have government contracts. Many of them have investments in government bonds. They are actively doing work for the government. In the case of some of these financial services companies or some of these investment management companies like BlackRock, for example, they've actually been hired by government and central banks. The Fed literally worked with BlackRock to help the Fed buy corporate bonds,
right,
that actually has been proven to benefit BlackRock. Okay, that happened. So the idea that these people, these big financial services companies that are banks that are heavily regulated by the government, that are getting bailouts from the government, that got COVID relief from the government, which means from the taxpayer, you're the one that paid for that, right? That is getting all of their money and regulations either from a government agency, from the Treasury, or from the Federal Reserve, which is a quasi-government group that is led by a board of governors that is appointed by the government, that all of this is somehow the free market is like the most nonsensical thing in the world. There's nothing free market about any of this. None of it. Right. And on top of it, the only reason that these investment management firms and banks have all this money that they can now throw into ESG initiatives and stuff like that is because the Federal Reserve has printed trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars at the behest, with the blessing and actually not even the blessing, with government begging them to do it for years and years and years. They've pumped money into the financial services industry. And now they're using it to discriminate against people who actually bailed out some of these very same banks. So think about the insanity of this. You as a taxpayer go to get a loan from a bank and they say to you, even though you haven't broken any laws or done anything wrong. Sorry, but, we didn't like that tweet that you had, or, you volunteered for the Trump administration, or you work for a gun manufacturer, and so we're not going to give you a loan, or we're not going to give you a mortgage because you didn't put solar panels on your roof, or whatever it is that they decide to do. Even though you bailed us out, even though the government has given us all this special treatment and you pay for that government, even though we pay lower taxes than everybody, than just regular people who are sole proprietors, even though we get all these special treatments, doesn't matter. We're going to deny access to you. And you know what? This is just the free market. So if you don't like it, then too bad for you. And last argument, more so than anything else, if you just wanted to have like a 10-second pitch to a conservative of why they should believe that something is wrong here, every single group of people that is constantly trying to destroy the free market is in favor of ESG. All of them, all the Democrats, all of the people on the far left, they love it. They love ESG. They're all for it, and they're actively fighting against these bills, trying to get rid of it. If you needed any other proof, it's that. What else could you possibly need? If you're voting on the same side as all the people who are trying to destroy the free market and put regulations in place, while they're making the argument that this is to defend the free market, something is wrong there. Right. You're on the wrong side. Okay. Yeah. That's all you should need to know. You should never be voting in favor of something that everybody who hates the free market is in favor of.
I do want to get to a last topic at hand, but Jim, did you want to make a final point on this?
Yeah, this will open up another can of worms, and we should do a whole other podcast on this because this has been talked about on Stopping Socialism TV. But if they had their way and ESG was right now universally adopted, do you think the left would be satisfied and say, "Great, we did it, guys. Let's kick our heels up"? No. What is the real end goal is a social credit system like they have in China. And they want that not for corporations and businesses, but for every one of us, for you and me. And ESG is basically a social credit system on training wheels. Although Justin would probably argue that the training wheels have been pulled off a while back.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, and just on that point, because that's a great point. We know for a fact already that individual investors, regular people with not that much money, somebody on this podcast right now, on this episode, is one of those people, has been given an ESG score. Lots of people have ESG scores.
Somebody in the comments that mentioned it. Yeah,
that's right. They don't even know that they have an ESG score. Many people, if you've got an investment account with many of the big brokerages, including some for BlackRock, like Merrill Lynch, for instance, for Bank of America. Bank of America owns Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch gives everybody an ESG score. Individual investors, you don't even need to ask for it. You get an ESG score for nothing. And earlier this year, we had someone from FICO, an analyst at FICO, which is the big credit scoring agency. If you have when you get your credit score and it's, 700 or whatever it is, that's a FICO credit score more often than not, right? FICO put out an analyst at FICO put out a report saying, here are my big predictions for 2022. And one of their big predictions was that ESG is going to continue to expand dramatically into credit scoring for small businesses that are not even in the corporate bond market, small businesses, and that eventually in the long run, it's going to affect individuals and their credit scores are going to be impacted by ESG, and that housing and mortgages and all of that stuff, which is individuals, is going to be impacted by ESG and probably very soon on that front. And this is the leader in individual credit scores and small business credit scores, and they're predicting that it's going to happen soon. So this isn't some crackpot crazy theory. There's mountains of evidence showing that this is going to happen. It's going to be applied to individuals as well as big businesses and small businesses.
Yeah, this is an incredibly important thing. We at the Heartland Institute and at the Socialism Research Center, we're going to continue to, push for this type of stuff. That map is like the most, I'm so proud of that map. And we're going to continue to do work on that and keep you all posted. So make sure to tune into this show and go to heartland.org for further information about this very important topic. With the final 6.5 minutes that we have here, I want to get into our secondary topic because I do have it on the thumbnail of the episode. So over the past couple of weeks, I've seen on multiple occasions the assertion that the economy is booming. And it's always that specific word. The economy is, quote, booming. Just this past weekend, a family member mentioned this in passing as a fact, that the economy is booming. Chris and I talked about this a little bit, and Chris, you told me that this is the narrative that's being propagated in the corporate media right now. And this came to as a bit of a shock to me, considering the news that we cover a lot on this podcast of the rampant inflation, the worst in 40 years, rising energy costs, rising food costs, the highest gas prices ever, the Fed getting set to increase baseline interest rates, supply chain issues that have kept goods off the shelves in grocery stores across the country, a workforce that doesn't want to work, skyrocketing national debt, continued stimulus from the government on both national and local levels, the bond market signaling a recession. I could probably go on, but I mean, Chris, what's going on here? Is the economy booming, or are we like on the precipice of a recession?
All right. So for our listeners and viewers, if you ever want to know the Democrats' talking points for the week, watch the Sunday shows. Because on the Sunday shows, you usually get Psaki, you get Ron Klain, you get, Jake Sullivan and them, and they are just parroting the talking points. The talking points on all the Sunday shows this past Sunday were everybody. The economy is booming all of a sudden. Unemployment is 3.6%. It's super low. The new permits or new applications for unemployment are down for the 50-year low. That is so meaningless. Donnie, ask anybody what the state of the economy is, and they're going to say it's terrible. Inflation, 40-year high, and that's being generous, because we know that it's, if they really calculated it like they did in the late 70s, early 80s, it would be almost double what it is now. Look at the price of the at the pump, just across the board. Americans understand that the economy is in shambles, but for people like Ron Klain and people in the Washington D.C. bubble, they think that they can get away by saying that the economy is booming because they are so out of touch. They are so hopelessly out of touch. When do you think the last time is Ron Klain went to the gas station and filled up his car? I bet it's literally been decades, because he has a government driver who just carts him from his home to to wherever he's going. These kind of people are immune to the to the terrible effects that their policies have produced. Therefore, I think it's easier for them to almost try to convince themselves that, well, actually the economy is good because they can point to a couple of numbers. The American people aren't buying it. Go look at the polling. American people across the board, economy is number one concern. Inflation, all this stuff. They're going to pay the price for this in November, and they can try their best to spin this, but the American people know better. The polls tell the story.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago in a group chat, a friend sent me a screenshot of an article. It's like a CNBC article or something like that. And it was mentioning something about the booming economy. And they highlighted it as this is a joke, and sent it to me. And I was like, oh, that must have been a typo, some relic of some old article that they just finally hit print on or something like that. And I was kind of shocked to see no, that's the narrative that's being pushed in the mainstream right now. And Jim, I mean, we're in the suburbs of Chicago, where they are now either starting or at least seriously talking about issuing stimulus checks to their citizens to help pay for gasoline. Yeah. That doesn't seem like a sign of a booming economy. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, California, I think Gavin Newsom already actually proposed or is going to be cutting checks soon. So yeah, the economy's so great, the government's got to give you checks to make ends meet. I mean, look, the New York Times is Pravda. They're actually probably worse than Pravda was during the Soviet Union times, because they're more of a joke, and too many people, I think, actually take them seriously. I mean, look, the article that you had up on screen, it said that inflation is all to do with high demand and low supply. Well, that's kind of a classic definition of inflation, or how inflation comes about. They make not a single mention of the fact that the government has injected trillions of dollars into the economy, devaluing the value of the dollar, as a matter of fact, over just the last 2 years. Unprecedented amount of spending. Look, people are not stupid. They can feel if the economy is good or not. They can go to the grocery store and see how much milk or butter or even potato chips cost now as compared to a year ago or 2 years ago. People, and then of course the price of gasoline is out there every time you drive by. You can see it. It's pretty much the only thing that the price, that's the only thing where the price is advertised every time you go by. It's gasoline, and people know that things are going in the wrong direction. And for the New York Times to try to convince people that, if the New York Times said the economy's booming, it must be booming. People are not idiots. People know what the economy is doing. And in fact, what's actually kind of ironic and maybe infuriating about this, depending on how you feel about the media, the economy actually was booming during the Trump administration. He took specific actions to make sure the private sector had as enough things out of its way so that the economy could actually start driving growth, real growth in this country. Wages went up. Black unemployment rate was down to record lows. Hispanic unemployment rate was down to record lows. That was a real booming economy. COVID wrecked it all. And now since Biden has come in, he has done everything in his power to keep the economy from coming back fully the way it should have done. People are not dumb. It doesn't matter how many times the New York Times tries to say it. Doesn't how many times Ron Klain or Jen Psaki is on TV saying, hey, I hope you guys are enjoying your booming economy. People feel it. People know what's happening in the country. And it's not this.
Justin, I'll give you last word on this topic before we sign off for the episode. But another sign that the economy is doing so well, is that the government is now extending the student loan payment freeze by another 4 months. Doesn't seem to be a sign of a booming economy.
Well, yeah, but in fairness, they'd probably do that even if the economy was booming. They're trying to figure out every way they possibly can to keep that thing rolling on and on and on. But yeah, look, the reason that everything that Chris and Jim said is spot on. There is no way that any person who is even somewhat reasonable and exists outside of their home or apartment for even just a couple of days will recognize that the economy is booming. The idea that that's happening is silly. It's completely ludicrous. It fits in with Joe Biden's we want to talk about misinformation. Joe Biden's campaign, his whole Twitter feed should be shut down for misinformation if that's how we're going to do things. And I don't think we should, but if that's how we're going to do it, it should be shut down because almost every day he puts something out. It may be every day that talks about how the most jobs in history have been added under his presidency for a first year, or that it's the best period of time in XYZ category, and he'll put some economic category out. And it's like, well, yeah, technically speaking, during his period of time, there has been lots of jobs not added, but that have come back. But that's because they destroyed 20 million jobs. They destroyed 18 million jobs overnight in the COVID pandemic. And then the Trump administration, working with pharmaceutical companies and or empowered by pharmaceutical companies, developed a vaccine to help alleviate bring the death toll down for COVID-19. It got rolled out just as Joe Biden came into office. He had nothing to do with any of that. That vaccine comes in, the death rate goes down, the economy starts to open back up again. We get the jobs that we lost back, and now he's claiming that he did something to bring those jobs back. He had nothing to do with it. All that he did was exist in the White House when all of these things were happening.
Right.
When you look at the employment to population ratio, which shows you roughly how many people are employed relative to the population of the country, okay? The employment to population ratio is slightly less than, well, it depends on the period of time you're talking about, but it is less right now. It is less than at any point we're talking monthly number too, at any point in 2018, any point in 2019, and the first 2 months of 2020. And the third month of 2020 is when the COVID stuff started going off the rails. Okay. So it's lower now than it was during any of those periods of time. Yes, there are more jobs in total now by not a ton, but there are more jobs now than there were at the start of the pandemic because there are more people than there were 2.5 years ago. And that's why you got to look at the ratios to see it. The bottom line is we're just now getting back to where we were 2.5 years ago.
Wait, there's more people now than before the pandemic? I thought we were the only 4 people alive in the world.
No, we're not.
Okay, sorry. Must be
at least not that I'm aware of. I mean, I could be living in the Matrix or the metaverse or something, and I just don't know it. But
yeah. Well, that music right there is basically the equivalent of the Oscar speech running too long thing going on. So we're gonna wrap up the episode for today. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Also, for all those people that are listening only, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, you can put a face to the voice if you tune in to our live stream on Thursdays at noon on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Rumble. You can join in the conversation, add your comments and questions. We will answer them, address them on the fly, potentially. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
Chris, what do you got to pitch?
StoppingSocialism.com,
Fantastic.
Heartland.org.
And Justin Haskins, where can the fine people find you?
They can find me on Elon Musk's Twitter experience at Justin T. Haskins.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.